Millions dead, billions stolen, entire nations hollowed out from the inside, and in most cases, nobody was ever punished. The African continent has been home to some of the 20th century's most devastating regimes, and the men behind them didn't just choose violence, they perfected it. Any top 5 list like this is debatable. The scale of suffering under other regimes was immense and could easily fill their own lists. But the 5 men we're about to examine were responsible for death on a scale that is almost impossible to comprehend. The question isn't just how many people they killed, it's how they got away with it for so long. How does one man bring an entire nation to its knees? How does a leader become a mass murderer, turning neighbor against neighbor and twisting the state into an engine of death? Today, we're looking at the reigns of 5 men who left scars on modern African history that are still felt today. We'll go beyond the propaganda to confront the documented horrors they oversaw and explore the different ways they held on to power, from open terror to systemic neglect. This is a journey into how absolute power can lead to absolute horror. By the time Charles Taylor was finally stopped, 2 countries had been torn apart, hundreds of thousands were dead, and children had been turned into killers. And he did it all while sitting in a presidential palace. Taylor's presidency in Liberia from 1997 to 2003 was the grim finale to a horrifying civil war that he was a central figure in starting. His rise to power was paved with violence. As a warlord, he was a key player in plunging Liberia into a war that ultimately claimed the lives of an estimated 150,000 to 250,000 people. His forces became infamous for using child soldiers, young boys and girls, often drugged and forced to commit unspeakable acts. But Liberia was only half the story. Taylor armed and backed the Revolutionary United Front, or RUF, a rebel group known for its campaign of pure terror, mass murder, rape, and the systematic amputation of civilians' hands and feet. In exchange for his support, Taylor got a steady stream of blood diamonds, which he used to fund his war machine. So while he was president of Liberia, he was also a primary architect of the chaos next door. His actions were a key factor in a conflict that killed another 50,000 to 70,000 people. International pressure and a rebellion at home eventually forced Taylor into exile in 2003. He thought that was the end of it. He was wrong. The Special Court for Sierra Leone convicted him of war crimes and crimes of humanity. He was sentenced to 50 years in prison. Taylor is often called the first former head of state convicted by an international tribunal since the Nuremberg trials, though it's worth noting that the former Prime Minister of Rwanda, Jean Kambanda, was convicted by the ICTR in 1998. Still, Taylor's conviction sent a message: a dictator's cruelty doesn't have to go unpunished. But the next man on our list never faced a courtroom, not once, and he may have caused even more damage without spilling a single drop of blood himself. He stole an estimated $5 billion from one of the most resource-rich nations on Earth, built a palace in the jungle, chartered Concorde jets for shopping trips to Paris, and ruled for 32 years while his people starved. Mobutu Sese Seko seized power in Zaire in a 1965 coup. He promised stability after years of chaos. What he delivered was a masterclass in corruption and state-sponsored neglect. Mobutu wasn't a genocidal killer in the way others on this list were. His regime was lethal in a more subtle, insidious way. His rule became the textbook definition of kleptocracy, rule by thieves. And the real body count wasn't in the streets, it was in the hospitals that never got built.
The nation's infrastructure, its roads, hospitals, and schools, simply crumbled. Without basic health care or a functioning economy, countless Congolese people died from preventable diseases and malnutrition. There isn't a reliable death toll directly linked to his governance, but it's clear his policies created the conditions for immense, invisible suffering. Political opponents were ruthlessly suppressed by his security forces. And his legacy is a chilling reminder that a dictator's greed can be as deadly as his army. He dumped the bodies of his victims in the River Nile. He expelled 70,000 people in 90 days. He murdered up to 300,000 of his own citizens, and he died peacefully in a luxury apartment in Saudi Arabia. Idi Amin's 8-year rule in Uganda from 1971 to 1979 was a chaotic storm of brutality, economic ruin, and mass murder that earned him the nickname the Butcher of Uganda. A former army commander, Amin took power in a military coup and quickly unleashed a reign of terror. His paranoia was legendary. He created state-sponsored death squads like the State Research Bureau that abducted, tortured, and killed anyone seen as an opponent. Lawyers, journalists, judges, and religious leaders simply vanished. Their bodies were often dumped into the River Nile. He viciously targeted the Acholi and Lango ethnic groups, but his terror was widespread, affecting Ugandans from all walks of life. Then, in 1972, in a disastrous act of economic nationalism, he expelled Uganda's entire Asian population, some 50,000 to 70,000 people, giving them just 90 days to leave. This act of ethnic cleansing shattered the country's economy. The exact death toll under Amin is impossible to know. The International Commission of Jurists estimated at least 80,000 dead, but believed a figure closer to 300,000 was more likely. Some put the number as high as 500,000. And yet, the man who ended his reign wasn't an international court, a revolution, or a coup. It was a football match gone wrong. Amin's rule finally ended in 1979 after he foolishly tried to annex part of neighboring Tanzania. The Tanzanian army invaded, and Amin fled. He lived out the rest of his days in comfortable exile in Saudi Arabia, never once facing justice for his crimes. The next name on our list did face an arrest warrant, an international one. But he, too, managed to evade justice for years while overseeing one of the most well-documented genocides of the 21st century. 300,000 people killed, 2.5 million displaced, villages burned to the ground, and the man responsible was still flying on a government jet for years after the international community said he was a war criminal. For 3 decades, Omar al-Bashir ruled Sudan with an iron fist, overseeing brutal civil wars and a campaign of horrific violence in the region of Darfur. When rebel groups rose up against the government in 2003, al-Bashir's response was brutal and systematic. He armed and unleashed the Janjaweed, a collection of Arab militias, giving them free rein to crush the rebellion. What followed was not a military operation. It was something much darker. What followed was a scorched earth campaign targeting specific ethnic groups. The Janjaweed wiped out entire villages, murdered civilians, and used mass rape as a weapon of war. The United Nations estimates that the conflict in Darfur killed around 300,000 people and displaced another 2.5 million.
For these atrocities, the International Criminal Court issued an arrest warrant for al-Bashir, charging him with war crimes, crimes against humanity, and genocide. The first time the ICC had ever issued a warrant for a sitting head of state. His rule finally ended in 2019 after a popular uprising. Sudan's transitional government said they would hand him over to the ICC, but subsequent political turmoil has left his fate uncertain. He has yet to face trial. The clock is still running. Up to 2 million people dead, streets littered with bodies, families forced to pay for the bullet that killed their own children. This is the legacy of the man at the top of our list. Mengistu Haile Mariam was the leader of the Marxist military junta known as the Derg, which came to power in 1974. By 1977, he had consolidated his control and unleashed a nightmare on Ethiopia that would last until 1991. After overthrowing Emperor Haile Selassie, Mengistu physically eliminated his rivals within the junta, then launched the Red Terror to wipe out all political opposition in the country. And he didn't just announce it quietly, he made sure everyone knew exactly what was coming. In a famous speech, he shouted, "Death to the counter-revolutionaries," and smashed bottles filled with red liquid to symbolize the blood he was about to shed. He kept his word. For the next 2 years, his security forces carried out a systematic campaign of mass arrests, torture, and public executions. University students and intellectuals were prime targets. The streets of the capital were often littered with bodies, and families were sometimes forced to pay a fee, a tax for the bullet, just to get the remains of their loved one back. Compounding the Dark Terror, Mengistu's catastrophic agricultural policies were a major cause of the devastating Ethiopian famine of 1983 to 1985. While estimates vary, some sources say as many as 1 million people perished. As rebel forces closed in on the capital in 1991, Mengistu fled the country. He was granted asylum in Zimbabwe, where he is believed to still live today. An Ethiopian court tried him in his absence and found him guilty of genocide, but Zimbabwe has refused all requests to extradite him. Mengistu remains a free man, which raises the same question that hangs over almost every name on this list. If the worst dictators in African history mostly escaped justice, what does that say about the systems that were supposed to stop them? The reigns of these 5 men are some of the darkest chapters in modern history, from the blood diamonds of Liberia to the Red Terror of Ethiopia. Their stories are a grim look at what happens when authority goes completely unchecked. The sheer numbers are hard to wrap your head around. Millions of lives lost to state-sponsored terror, war, and engineered famine. While one, Charles Taylor, has faced a measure of justice, others, like Idi Amin and Mengistu Haile Mariam, never answered for their crimes. Their legacies aren't just in the history books, they are the deep, painful wounds that millions of people still live with today. Reflecting on these horrors leaves us with a heavy question. What lessons must we learn to make sure history never repeats itself? What do you think are the most important factors that allow such regimes to take hold? Let us know your thoughts in the comments. And if you found this video informative and believe these stories need to be told, please like and subscribe for more historical deep dives. Thanks for watching.